Okay, good afternoon, colleagues and friends of IGAD. Welcome to this second edition of the IGAD thematic webinar series. My name is Jasper Mwesgwa. I'm a regional food security analyst based at ICPAC in Nairobi. And today's edition is jointly organized by IFRA. IFRA is IGAD Food Security, Nutrition, Resilience Analysis Hub, and the Climate Change Unit of ICPAC. And the theme of the day is climate change impacts on agriculture and food security within the East African region. Before I introduce the chief guest to officially open this important, well-thought webinar, allow me to make a few announcements and house rules. Number one, I would like to inform you that the system will only allow panelists to speak during their presentations, and participants are kindly requested to make use of the Q&A and chat features of Zoom to post their questions or other important pieces of information. And the moderator will from time to time interject, read out the questions, and give time to the panelists to respond. If time allows, towards the end, a few participants will be allowed to speak and ask questions, and our dear panelists will be happy to answer you. Our panelists today are the best we have in the region, and in areas around the theme, these are the best we have. So please sit, relax, and let's all learn something new today. May I now invite Dr. Guled Atan, the director of ICPAC, to give his opening remarks and also to officially open this important conversation. Dr. Guled Atan, welcome. And maybe
okay.
Excuse me, Dr. Gred is coming.
Well, yeah, I was mute, so thank you very much, Jasper, and good afternoon all. As Jasper said, my name is Guled Atan. I'm the director of IGAD Climate Prediction Application Center here in Nairobi. Let me start with distinguished ladies and gentlemen. ICPAC is a regional climate center of excellence that creates regional products, including long-range forecasts that support regional and national climate activities, thereby strengthens the capacity of the member states in the Greater Horn of Africa region, the 8 IGAD member countries plus the 3 East African countries, to deliver better climate services to national users. Ladies and gentlemen, the Greater Horn of Africa has about 4% of the world population, but until a few years we were the recipients of 40% of all global food aid. With climate change, there is a high probability that the current food insecurity in the region will worsen if nothing changes. Food insecurity in this region is due to the low production in the agriculture of the region, plus extreme climate variability that we have seen the last few years, and sometimes conflict in some parts of the region. The IGAD region has continued to witness an increasing trend in climate shocks, conflicts, and lately microeconomic shocks, and also pests that have put the livelihood of the food security of the population at risk. But the last 10 years, this region has experienced an upward trend in the level of food insecure people in the region. With every year, more people are in need to food aid. For example, in 2019, the compounding effect of drought, flood, conflicts, and some macroeconomic shocks have rendered almost 27 million people in the region acutely food insecure, IPC phase 3 or more. The prevalence of the food insecurity is highest in the arid and semi-arid lands assaults, which account for about 60 to 65% of the landmass of the IGAD region. Although drought is the most prevalent climate variability factor that impacts food insecurity, it is not the only one. From late last year, we have seen an enhanced seasonal rainfall throughout the region, with all the lakes going up to historical levels. Those enhanced rains have caused riverine and flash floods and landslides in parts of Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan now, Uganda, leading to the loss of lives and displacement and destruction of infrastructure and affecting over 3 million people. IGAD has released a report on a sustainable strategy that could alleviate the chronic food insecurity in the region. Beside the climate strategy considered, the IGAD strategy, beside the climate variability, it considers the negative effects that the control measures to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus implemented by the government of the region has on the food security, especially the current quarantines and lockdowns and border closures. We estimate that about 51 million people, approximately 20% of the population of the IGAD region, will likely be food insecure throughout 2020. Our hope is that by climate proofing the region will help greatly the region to prepare and resolve the constraints on the food security that the region is seeing. ICPAC has been a leader in climate services in this region and will continue to do so. With those few remarks, I call on this meeting as open, and thank you very much. I will listen to the following proceeding. Thank you very much. Jasper, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guled, the director of ICPAC. ICPAC is IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center. It is accredited center by the World Meteorological Organization, and it provides climate services to 11 Eastern African countries. And may I also mention that Dr. Guled previously held a very powerful position as a principal scientist at the United States Geological Survey, or the USGS, and he holds a PhD in civil engineering from Utah State University in the States. Thank you very much, Dr. Guled, once again, and welcome everyone. So our first panelist will be Dr. Kindi Tesfaye Fantaye. Dr. Kindi is a senior scientist at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, or CIMMYT, which is based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He obtained his PhD in agricultural meteorology from the Department of Soil, Crop, and Climate Sciences at the University of the Free State in South Africa. And Dr. Kindi has over 15 years of experience in executing, managing, climate smart agriculture, climate services, cropping systems modeling, and foresight and targeting projects in developing countries. Dr. Kindi will lead a discussion on the future of agriculture and possible future climate change scenarios. Welcome, Dr. Kindi. Dr. Kindi.
Dr. Kindi, you are free to unmute yourself and present.
Dr. Kindi, are you hearing us? Okay. Dr. Kindi, go ahead and share the screen. Okay, so looks like Dr. Kindi is having technical issues. May I call on the next presenter? May I call on the next presenter? Dr. Julius Kabubi.
Okay, thank you very much. Just for,
Okay.
yeah, okay. You can hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
I wanted to show my face, but I'm locked. If the mother can allow me to show my face, that would be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Julius. Julius, you are free. You are free. You can unmute yourself. You can present. You're a panelist.
Yeah, but I cannot open my video. That's the problem. From this side. It's telling me you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, but all the same. Okay, thank you very much. I can be going on as Kemodo sets out that. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you very much, Jasper, for inviting me to this, and especially to the director of ICPAC for extending this invitation to this very important webinar. As many of you may be aware, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction is the custodian of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, supporting member states, regional economic communities, partners, and stakeholders to effectively implement the Sendai Framework. The Sendai Framework was the first to be adopted among the post-2015 international frameworks and agreements, coming therefore before the SDGs and even the Paris Agreement for climate action. The SDGs therefore made reference to the Sendai Framework and recognized it as a tool for resilience and a bridge towards attainment of the SDGs. With its 4 well thought through priorities for action, the SEDAI framework calls for prevention of new and reduction of existing disaster risks through the implementation of an integrated and inclusive economic, structural, legal, social, health, cultural, educational, environmental, technological, political, and institutional measures that prevent and reduce hazard exposure and vulnerability to disasters, thus increasing preparedness for response and recovery, and thus strengthening resilience. I was invited to talk a bit on how the SEDAI framework supports this SDG 2 on food security. And I think I want to say that we all know disaster risk reduction cuts across different sectors of development. Indeed, there are about 25 targets of the SDG that are related to disaster risk reduction in 10 of the 17 SDGs. This firmly establishing the role of disaster risk reduction as a core strategy for development. In East Africa, like in many countries in Africa, natural hazards are a cause of food insecurity and hunger, particularly when they compound existing economic vulnerability. Large shocks and extensive risks destroy agricultural assets and infrastructure, causing serious damage to livelihoods and food security of millions of small-scale farmers, pastoralists, fishermen, and in many developing countries in the region. Often people depend on agriculture. I think we all know that East Africa is an agrarian economy. So people depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, and they face increased exposure to disaster risk, which trap them in a cycle of food insecurity and poverty. The high impact of disaster and climate on agriculture calls for enhanced mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation strategies within the agricultural sector. Looking at the SDG 2, one realizes that target 2.4 is the most relevant to disaster and climate change. And this target calls for ensuring sustainable food production systems and implementing resilient agricultural practices that increases productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystem, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disasters, and that progressively improve flood and soil quality. This target, if you look at it critically, supports the immediate need to advance actions in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation into agricultural sector planning and investments in order to promote resilient livelihoods, food production, and resilient ecosystems. In the context of the SEDAI framework, the relevant actions would include strengthening productive assets such as livestock, working animals, tools, and seeds. Agricultural practices also need to be modified in order to adapt to the projected changes in climate conditions, as well as increasing disaster risk. We need sustainable and productive agricultural systems, including farm technologies and practices such as crop diversification to adjust to new temperatures and precipitation patterns. We need changing livestock breeding practices and shifting grazing patterns. We need developing and managing of climate resilient food production systems. We need developing and using drought and food tolerant crop varieties and adapting water and soil moisture conservation measures, which are just but a few examples of what we can do to help prevent, mitigate, and reduce disaster and climate risk. As we aspire to attain food security in East Africa, we must understand, the basic question is, we must understand how climate and disaster risk can threaten the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 2 on zero hunger. We know that disasters often lead to household and community assets loss and livelihoods at disruption, potentially triggering negative coping mechanisms, undermining resilience. Recurring disasters from all causes and climate change impacts drive also generational poverty. We also know that climate change and hazards events can exacerbate the multidimensional poverty, but by impacting on people's health and well-being, damaging ecosystem, infrastructure, and food systems, and is disrupting economic activities, both in education, healthcare, and also other service provisions. We also know that climate change is contributing to degradation of the ecosystems and changes in seasonal weather patterns, undermining agriculture, pastoral and fisheries production, livelihoods, and food security. And we also know that disaster and climate change impacts affect people's health and well-being and damages food production assets. We should therefore be able to identify, we should not only, it is not enough, what I mean here is not enough really to understand the threats to the attainment of the SDG 2. I think it is also important that we should be able to identify risk generated by developmental practices. This is because risk-blind pursuit of SDG can generate climate and disaster risks as well. If laws, if policies and practices supporting agriculture, husbandry, fishery, forestry do not consider disaster risk and projected climate change impacts, they are risking promoting maladaptive practices, degrading ecosystems, introducing new hazards, and exacerbating existing risk. In other words, it is good to ask ourselves, are the laws, policies, programs that support agricultural production, forestry, fisheries, are they sensitive to disaster and climate change and the needs of farmers, the needs of fishermen, the needs of vendors, the needs of vendors, traders, all those who are at high risk areas? Then after discussing that, then you ask ourselves, then what is it that we can be able to do? Can we be able to use the tools that we have at our disposal to address this problem of food insecurity? So what is the solution? This is the question.
Jasper, I think we've lost Mr. Kibubi. Jasper, I don't know if you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear you? I don't know if Mr. Kibubi is back. I think he's gone completely. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I was mute indeed. I didn't know. Apologies for that. So when Bwana Kibubi comes back, we will try and give him a few minutes to finish his presentation. But for now, allow me to introduce Dr. Evelyn Komutunga. Dr. Komutunga is a senior agrometeorologist and a program leader for soils agrometeorology and environment program at the National Research Laboratories Institute of the National Agricultural Research Organization in Narrow in Uganda. She is an agrometeorologist with over 30 years of experience in analyzing climate characteristics for rain-fed systems in Uganda, and also the Greater Horn of Africa. And Dr. Komutunga holds a PhD in meteorology from the University of Nairobi. Dr. Komutunga will be talking to us, leading presentation on the historical trends and impacts of climate change, climate variability on agriculture and food security. So Dr. Komutunga, you are welcome. Switch on your video and audio and share your PowerPoint from wherever you are sharing from.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And as Dr. Komutunga is setting up, may I welcome Professor Laban Ogalo, the former director of IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center, who has spared some time to join us. You are welcome, Professor Ogalo. Thank you very much for keeping in touch with us. You are warmly welcome. Go ahead, Dr. Komutunga.
Good evening once again. I'm going to talk about food security and production. My presentation is going to load in a minute. Just a minute. Of course, we know that the region is now going through difficult time in terms of food security. And what we are looking at is both crops and livestock. In the region, we have a lot of animals, but these animals are facing a lot of difficulty in terms of pasture, in terms of water, and also the load of diseases and pests that are mainly related to climate or triggered by climate. Also, crops are affected in the same way. And over the years, we've had a lot of pandemics within the crop sector. We had the coffee wilt disease that wiped out a lot of coffee trees. When the presentation loads, you'll be seeing that.
Dr. Komutunga, would you kindly switch on your video as well?
I'm trying to do that. That's why you see I'm talking. It's trying to load right now.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay, so as I was saying, we've had a lot of diseases for crops within the region. We had coffee wilt disease in the late 90s and early 20s, and up to now it is still ongoing. And this has wiped out a lot of coffee trees within the region, causing financial loss that is over billions of dollars, especially in the Uganda coffee sector. We also had the banana bacterial wilt, and government pumped in a lot of money to help cushion the households that are affected. And this banana bacterial wilt also affected a lot of livelihoods, impacting the volume of food that families that depend on banana can eat, but also the income from sale of bananas. We had the cassava mosaic virus that affected most cassava growing areas in the region. And this also caused a lot of loss, and it's still there as we speak now. Though the breeding programs have come up with resistant varieties, but the problem is still. We have had another disease of cassava called cassava brown streak that causes rotting. Yes.
Dr. Komutunga, we are seeing only the first slide, and it's not in PowerPoint mode. Kindly put it in PowerPoint mode.
Okay. Is it okay
Yes,
now?
yes. And if you can, you could begin afresh, because I think you said some things which we are not flowing with the slides.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So you can see everything now?
Yes, except we can't see your video. Is your video on?
Yes.
Yeah.
You
Very
can
good.
see.
Very good.
Thank you
Karibu.
very much. It's not been a journey on technology, but we have zoomed through it.
Yes.
So my topic was past and present impacts of climate change as they affect agriculture and food security. And I said in the region, there are so many people that are being affected. Okay. Increase the frequency and intensity of climate variability, of course, appears through highly variable rainfall, erratic rainfall, together with, of course, rising temperatures, floods, and droughts. And these drive much of the food production and food security in the region. Of course, there is political conflict, but that's for another day. In the area that I'm presenting, I have 5 key areas to look at. We have impacts coming from frequent hazards, that is drought, dry spells, floods, and other related natural hazards. There is environmental and land degradation, mainly because of torrential rain that causes erosion. There is a lot of pests and disease infestation in animals and crops. Of course, we know that much of the labor is provided by people, and when they fall sick, that is also another driver. And then there is the issue of recurrent natural hazards. So you lose a crop this season, next season you lose the crop, the next season you don't even have what to plant, and so your livelihoods are eroded in that way. Those are some of the pictures. I don't know whether they are clear on your side, showing you how drought can affect maize production. And this particular slide was taken here at Namlonge. And when drought hits, when maize is flowering, that also causes a total yield loss. That is a flooded groundnut field in the Teso region during 2020, just recently. And groundnuts being a root crop, when there is water, everything rots and the farmers harvest nothing. That is a picture taken in Kabale in Western Uganda, where you can get like half of the hill going down with all the crops and all the homesteads and livestock alike causing loss. Now, in case of animals, we have the probable link of livestock diseases with climate. And in the region, we've seen that about 20% of ruminants and more than 50% of poultry causing a loss of approximately 30 billion per year. Some of these diseases are climate sensitive, and among the 65 that have been identified by the animal health system, about 58 are climate related. And of course, how they are closely linked to climate. Sometimes you look at the pathogens that cause the diseases, the high temperatures and greater humidity generally increase the rate of development. In case of vectors like ticks, changes in rainfall and temperature regimes may affect both the distribution and abundance. In case of human behavior, some people, when, for example, you're sick, you may keep your animals also in a way that exposes them to infestation. And then, of course, with the new pathogens and new vectors, because of the changes in heat stress and inadequate food and water, you can have new pathogens emerging. And then in ecosystem services, there are some animals or tree species, whatever, that are going to be extinct, and that causes imbalance in diluting disease transmission, and so therefore that affects biodiversity. Now, the impacts on livestock, of course, we have poor or increased milk yield in terms of cattle and goats, but we also have sick animals that sometimes leads to death. And during the drought periods, usually the animals go for low prices and farmers lose money. Those are some of the pictures, like this was taken in Mandela, and you can see that livestock can die because of this Rift Valley fever. In terms of crops, I had talked about the coffee wilt disease. You can see an affected plant there, and this killed nearly almost 50% of the Robusta coffee plants during the early 90s in Uganda. The same as banana bacterial wilt that wiped out about 60% of the bananas and is still currently ravaging the banana growing areas. Then the cassava brown streak that I talked about, you can really see how the roots can rot. The maize litho-necrotic virus disease during the 2010s, and in some sections in this country, you can still see how this disease is affecting the maize. On the left, you can see how you plant infected seed. You can lose the whole field. And then on the right, you can see that mama there with her maize affected. Another issue that has affected maize has been the fall armyworm from 2016 to present. And on the right, you can really see that in a single batch of eggs, so many millions hatch. And then on the right, you can see an actively feeding fall armyworm. And this causes, this pest actually nests within the funnel of the maize plant. And so it eats the growing tip and nothing comes out of that plant. And recently, we had the desert locust in Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and Uganda and South Sudan. You can see on the right a swarm within Teso region that landed in one of the villages. Then on the left, you can see a mature desert locust. There are other diseases that are related to climate, though they may not be on a very epidemic level, but they still affect a lot during the drought. And this is the cassava spider mite. On the right, you can see an affected plant. all the growing tips are eaten, and on the left, you can see the spider mite. We also have the cassava mosaic, as I said earlier. You can see that the plants don't even have any roots on them. And top right, you can see an affected leaf, and top left and bottom left, bottom right, you can see the breeding program trying to develop resistant varieties for that mosaic. Thank you for listening to me. I think that was enough to stimulate some interest, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Komutunga from Naro, Uganda, for that very important conversation. It looks like climate change is leading the possibility of pests and diseases wiping out the entire agriculture sector. And hopefully we will hear from the researchers what they are doing to make sure that this does not happen. Thank you once again, Dr. Komutunga. So, friends and colleagues, may I invite Dr. Kindi Tesfaye. I had introduced him, and his topic is on future of agriculture under the possible future climate change scenarios. Dr. Tesfaye, you are welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Jasper. Hi, everyone. Can I share my screen?
Go ahead, Dr. Kindi.
Can you ask the previous speaker to stop sharing, because it says that...
Dr. Kindi, you can go ahead and share now.
Yes, I'm doing that right now. All right. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Very
it is
good.
visible.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to present. So my talk will be on projected future regional climate change scenarios and potential impacts on regional agriculture and food security. So the assignments here are two. I think the first one is to look into what the future looks like in terms of climate projections, in terms of the changes that we expect in the coming 40, 30 years. And then to look into the possible impacts of those changes on agriculture and food security. So before we jump to the projections, I think it would be important to see that climate is a major driver of food security, particularly in Africa, and particularly in the eastern part of Africa, where climate variability and change is a major driver of almost what we do in agriculture and natural resources. So the issue here is this driver has got its own role, but impacts are actually a combination of several factors. So we shouldn't undermine that. Even if climate is a trigger, the actual impacts on food security are a result of several interacting factors in that. So we have to look at, so there are always weather vagaries, and this affects production, and then this also is influenced by prices, imports, exports, and also the general infrastructure situation in a given country, the economic, political, social, technological situation that are in place within a given country, and the state or corporate market situation, and the systemic situations that are amplifying or mitigating factors that are involved here, including the safety nets, including aid and all that. So all that combined will affect then food security. So in the next part of my presentation, when I talk about impacts, I would like to remind the audience that climate is one of, or the major driver, but it is not the only one that affects everything. So it is a trigger for all those that happens. So when it comes to the projections for East Africa for the period 2050, there are a lot of studies conducted in specific countries, in specific situations. And in fact, these changes that we expect in the coming, say, 2050 or after 40 years, would be 30 years, would be different for each country and within agroecological regions within a given country. But I think when we generalize as a region, East Africa, then there are studies that have been conducted to look into the general or aggregate impact of climate and its projections in the East Africa region. So my focus will be here is specific to the region. And luckily, recently, colleagues from USAID have compiled the studies that have been conducted by different researchers in the Eastern African component and provided the East African climate profile. And my presentation will focus on those ones. So the first thing is that, as expected and has been talked in many occasions, there will definitely be increased temperatures. And by 2050, up to 3 degrees Celsius warming is expected. And this will be, again, affecting the region. So on average, the region is expected to experience a temperature increase of between 1 to 3 degrees Celsius, which is a lot in terms of biological terms, in fact. And then there will be also increased frequency and duration of heat waves in many parts of the region, particularly in Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan will be hotter than usual in terms of temperature. When you look at, again, the projections in terms of rainfall or precipitation, there are mixed reports. In fact, different researchers reported different results for different regions or different countries. But in general, most of the ensemble results indicate a relative increase in the region in terms of rainfall, particularly the JJS season. Which is, and this increase is higher for Ethiopia and Kenya in general. But there are shifts in terms of seasonality for much of the region, particularly the rainfall that is expected in October or December is going to be increasing. But the March-May precipitation is projected to decrease in many parts of the region. And there was also an increase in the inter-seasonal and interannual rainfall variability within each season as well. So that are unequivocal projections for the region. In addition, if we look at the climate extremes and seasonal level rises, particularly those countries in East Africa that have got coastal areas such as Tanzania, Somalia, Sudan, there are also issues there. So when you look at, again, these extremes, I think one of the most striking thing, as our previous speaker talked about the historical trends, there will also be more intense climate extremes in the coming years as well. So there will be increased frequency and intensity of heavy precipitation events, especially in most projections indicate this will be extreme in Ethiopia and Tanzania. Intensified drought occurrences in terms of intensity as well as frequency, and also disappearance of the region's glaciers, which have been visible in the highlands of East Africa, particularly such as Mount Kilimanjaro and some mountains, Mount Kenya and in Ethiopia as well. So those will disappear, and also those areas with vast areas of coastal areas such as Tanzania, Somalia, and some of the Sudan areas, there will be sea level rises of up to 46 centimeters projected by 2050. So I think if this is the projection, so what does it mean, or what are really these implications in terms of agriculture and food security, in fact? So in the coming few slides, I'll look into what are really the implications of those changes that we have already looked at in the above 3 slides. So I think the first visible impact would be on crops, definitely. You know that the region is a major breadbasket and many crops are growing, and it's a center of diversification of many plant species. But I think these rising temperatures, increased heat, shifting seasonal rainfall patterns, increased frequency, intensity of heavy rainfall, and in some areas sea level rise will have multidimensional impacts, including in some cases there will be crop failures, reduced yields and quality. There are studies using climate projected data as well as process-based models indicate that most of the crops will experience a yield reduction of between 5 to 46% for most of the dominant crops in the region, except in some cases, cassava is found to be the most resilient one. In fact, that it was a study say. But I think in other cases, there is also suitability of, changes in suitability of agroecological zones. A prominent example is a study on coffee in Ethiopia and Uganda indicate that the coffee suitability areas will be, most of the most suitable areas, 80% will be lost by 2050 unless any adaptation measures are taken. So, and for so many crops, some of the lowland crops will be, climbing up into the highlands, and those which are adapted to the highland areas, what we call them temperate crops such as wheat, barley, and others will be highly confined to the top altitude areas of the region. As the previous speaker mentioned, there will be increased incidence of pests and diseases in many ways. Some of them are unknown ones. For example, some examples already mentioned, the maize lethal necrosis disease, the fall armyworm, the yellow and stem rests of wheat and barley, maize stalk borers and coffee berry, all and others will be, more devastating. Even some unknown disease may be even appearing in the coming 20, 30 years. So again, heavy intensity rainfall will cause also some flooding, heavy rainfall, and will this affect, again, most of the region's production. If we look at, again, in terms of impact on livestock, again, there will be also multidimensional impacts. Most of the impacts that are related to livestock are related to feed availability, physiological stress in terms of production, physiological processes, feed availability, water availability, and diseases and pests. So this will be, again, associated with this increase in temperature and heat waves and shifting seasonal patterns and also climate extremes. So in some areas there will be, some reduced livestock production, growth rates, milk production because of heavy heat stress situations, and also in terms of maintaining food items such as milk in those situations, and also the degradation of rangelands and availability of fodder. Early drying of some of the seasonal waters, and also depletion of groundwater resources could be there, and also restrictions in the case of pastoral mobility will also affect the production and productivity of livestock, and also, in fact, increased outbreak of some pests and diseases that are already mentioned by the previous speaker, but also new ones could appear. When we look at, again, another area which in terms of impact is the water resources. In fact, this year we have witnessing heavy rainfall because of the extremes. That this is not a normal year. This is a very wet year, which is part of the extreme component of climate change. And we've seen floods in Ethiopia, in Sudan, and in some parts of the pastoral areas as well, which are not expected to be flooded this time. So I think the impact is also multidimensional here in terms of water resources. There could be, reduced river flow and increased water shortages in some areas, particularly the Blue Nile Initiative area is projected to face some reduction in terms of water supply. Also, climate change could affect water quality because these heavy rainfalls can pollute water resources by creating erosion and leaching nutrients and put them in water points. Increased risk of waterborne diseases such as typhoid, cholera, bilharzia, diarrhea, and even mosquito situations, even migrating from the lowland to the highlands. So the flood damages, as I've already mentioned, is expected to aggravate in some areas. That doesn't mean that there is too much water. It's because of the intense situation that happens once or twice in a year. And also saltwater intrusion in some coastal aquifers of the region, the one countries I mentioned already. And then finally, I think we can also look at that climate can also affect the human health and food security in general. These are very interrelated. Because of these extremes, there will be some problems related to increased mortality and morbidity related to heat stress, particularly during some of the months, particularly between October to May, June, very high temperature area in the region. And this is expected to be very high in the coming years. So increased downing and displacement related to inland and coastal flooding, the one we are witnessing this year, increased poverty, food insecurity, and malnutrition caused by crop losses or diseases related to this one, which also affects human health and their food security. And then increased risk of vector-borne diseases, which all affect this one. So it's a lot in terms of looking at each sector. Also, climate change affects the infrastructure that also affects the input-output market for agriculture, but I'm not going to deal with that. And then in general, the ecosystems will be also affected. Again, climate change will have multidimensional effects here as well. So in terms of biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, loss of native vegetation, and also even appearance of wildfires that could also engulf some of the protected areas in the region. The region is very well known for its parks and natural resources, but this could be also highly influenced by the changes in the ecosystem services that are highly influenced by climate variables. So if we look at all this in short, then I think all this has got an economic impact in general. A very good study that indicates the economic impact of climate change by 2050 indicates that Africa would lose 4.7% of GDP on average, and the East Africa region particularly could lose 2 to 4% of the GDP depending on the country because of the climate change. So this has got not only physical or biological impacts, but the economic impact is also huge as projected here. So in general, when we summarize what we've said above, then there are projections increase that there will be hotter situations and some uncertain precipitation trends over the region. But very clear is that extremes will increase, such as droughts, floods, dry spells, and also some rises in coastal areas. And this will have got a multidimensional effect on crop production, livestock, water resources, health and food security situation, even the infrastructure we talk about, and ecosystem services. So all this will definitely affect the region in terms of economy, in terms of livelihoods, and in terms of its competitiveness compared to other regions in the globe in general. So when we come back to the slide that we started with, then this issue of climate will lead to unstable food security situation in the region, which leads to, as we can see even from the past trends, is that it could lead to, when the food security situation is highly affected, it leads to displacement, conflict, and migration. And we've seen that so many people are migrating out of the region, traveling to other countries, even drowning in the oceans and seas to cross other countries. So it is a major impact. And that is why we said that the climate is a major driver of food security in the region. So finally, the final slide is this one. I think this is real, and we cannot really contemplate on what will happen. But I think what we should think now is what we can do to reverse the situation, or at least to adapt and live with it. So building resilience is a key for ensuring food security in the region, and there has to be adaptation efforts that need to be done to build resilience in the region. And to do this, there is no only shortcuts. There is no only one more shortcut. There has to be an integrated technological, institutional, and policy interventions to at least build resilience in the region. So countries need to be, active in order to look at policy options that provide innovation, that enhances innovations, practices, and in business, that there has to be also technological innovations, particularly climate smart ones. And also we have to be also very good in strengthening institutions that has been even traditional institutions that have been left, but still have a role to play in terms of building resilience. So there has to be an integrated effort in the region, and there has to be willingness to do that, to avert this. So that is all what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kindi, for this comprehensive discussion. Thank you, really. I thought that you were going to tell us that things are going to be better in the future, but you have just confirmed that things are not going to be very good. And at least you have suggested some recommendations for technological and other interventions. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next panelist. Bwana Lemgo Godwin. Lemgo Godwin is a regulatory scientist, affairs manager for the Africa office at Bayer Crop Science. He is passionate about modern agriculture and has got vast experience working on science-based regulatory policies across Africa. He has experience working with both the private and public sector, especially on issues of scientific innovation and regulations. He has a background in food science, nutrition, food safety, and biosafety of agricultural biotechnology. Mr. Godwin will present about the public-private sector partnerships in building resilience to climate change. Welcome, Bwana Godwin.
Thank you very much. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. We can see your screen. We would like you to turn on your video so that we can see you as well.
So I did turn on my video. I hope it picks up soon. Otherwise, let me try it again.
Okay.
Okay. Is that better? Are you able to see the video now?
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, we can see you.
And also
go ahead.
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Okay.
If you could put it in
very much.
presentation mode.
And thank you very much for the opportunity to present to this August group, and thanks to all the previous panelists who have spoken before me. So I would focus my talk on the role of private sector in all of this, and also some of the private-public partnerships in building resilience. And without belaboring the point, I think it's fair to say that agriculture has contributed to this problem, but it's also a potential solution. So we all do know that agriculture or there are reports that suggest that agriculture contributes to roughly 25% to global greenhouse emissions, and this already is a challenge when it comes to these discussions of climate change. But agriculture also has the potential to contribute to solving the problem of climate change. The real challenge that we are seeing here is, I mean, facing agriculture is how we are going to feed a growing population using dwindling resources without putting too much pressure on the ecosystem. And as some of the past speakers have already alluded to, you could see that there's already a bit of pressure on our ecosystem, which is being caused by climate change, and you don't want to exacerbate that. And also considering that Africa is going to be one of the continents that's going to contribute significantly to the global population growth. Then this is a big challenge indeed. So the big paradox then is whether to produce or to preserve. So and we all do know that if you want to entirely preserve, then it's very easy for you to reach your climate targets. But we cannot just preserve. We need to produce because there is a growing population that need to be fed, changing diet patterns that need to be met, and all of that. And so the question is how to produce and preserve at the same time, which brings us to the topic of sustainable intensification, which is it is possible to be able to produce more with less using sustainable practices that would not put too much stress on an environment that is already under stress due to climate change. And so we are already seeing some of this happening. So you could see agriculture has come quite a long way, and it's in some way not nearly enough, but in some way already contributing to this to solving some of these paradoxes. So this is a picture of an experimental plot in the US, and if you can see this area back in the good old days, how much land and inputs and resources you would need to produce the same amounts that, for instance, compared to recent years, where you need much more smaller fields, less inputs to get the same amount of yield. This is by no means to suggest that we have reached, but agriculture has made some progress in reaching that. And the future where we want to go is to even produce more with much less inputs that will reduce our carbon footprint. So this is not very clear from the picture, but if you could see this a bit clearer, that maze you're seeing, the reason you're not seeing much difference between these two is because this is shorter maze, and so we're looking at what we call short stature corn, which would then enable us to produce more with less resources. So it is doable. How do we make agriculture part of the solution? Previous speakers have already outlined a number of these problems already, and to make agriculture part of a solution, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but will require a number of potential levers. For instance, from as simple as cover crops, which would help us keep some of these greenhouse gases in the soil, to advanced breeding techniques that would then enable us to come up with new germplasm that would enable us to fight some of these problems that are being caused by climate change, be it pest and diseases. We would now, or even environmental stress, we are able now to produce using advanced breeding techniques, seeds that would be able to withstand some of these abiotic stress factors, and even the biotic stress factors that is being caused by climate change. But also using advanced practices that would help us to conserve water a bit better, and also digital solutions, also disrupting the sector right now, which is helping us mine a number of data points that would then feed into agricultural practices that would allow the farmer to avoid unnecessary fertilization or an unnecessary spraying of crop protection products, efficient use of water resources, and all of that. All of these using advanced digital tools and also predictions that would help the farmer to reduce carbon footprint. We're also looking at areas such as no-till agriculture, where now we are able to encourage conservation farming, such that you don't spend a lot of energy and scarce resources to go till the soil, and also thereby liberating all of those carbon that has been sequestrated. But then you can actually cultivate your fields without tilling the farm, and all of this is possible because of technological advancements that are coming up. So it is possible to promote all of these changes, but it would take a bit of work, in that we would need to then establish a fair price for carbon, and also incentivize farmers to be able to build that into their farming practices, thereby resulting in a meaningful reduction in carbon emissions. So think of it this way: what if, aside the crops that the farmer would harvest that you have to pay for, we can also pay the farmer for his demonstrable ability to sequestrate carbon in the soil. That way, they have additional incentives and income stream to be able to build some of these climate smart practices into their agricultural systems. So here at Bayer, we are already collaborating with multiple partners and stakeholders and NGOs and all of that to start making this a reality. We are already working with some of these NGOs and external parties to come up with a carbon accounting framework model that we could use. But aside that, also partnering with the farmers to understand their needs better in times of this changing climate. Or we're also deploying a number of some of these digital tools that I've already spoken about. And we are also making some bold sustainability commitments that I like to talk about. Some of these commitments includes reducing field greenhouse gases by 30%. Also reducing environmental impact of crop protection products by 30%. And we are also hoping to empower at least 100 million smallholder farmers in the coming years. All of these targeted as various as SDGs. and we are hoping to achieve all of this through seeds and traits, crop protection, digital farming, and then also a tailored solution that embodies all of these technologies. So I just stay on this slide a bit further. So I guess some of the previous speakers did talk about so some challenges. For instance, if we talk about pests and diseases, they spoke about fall armyworm and also the current locust invasion that is ravaging the region and all of that. We talk about fall armyworm invasion, for instance. There are solutions, tailored solutions out there that involve advanced breeding techniques and technological innovations that could help us to fight some of these issues. So it's not just mitigating; it's also trying to come up with better practices that would help the farmer to reduce their footprint in the first place, thereby improving the environment. And I'd like to talk about some of these partnerships that is enabling us to do just a few of them. One of them being the WEMA Tela maize. So WEMA is the water efficient maize for Africa. It's a partnership that started somewhere in 2008. It's now called Tela. Tela is not an acronym. It's just a Latin word meaning shield. You could use both interchangeably, and with this partnership, what we are trying to do is to avail technologies to the smallholder farmer in developing countries, particularly in Africa, that would help them fight pests and diseases better, but also help protect against extreme weather conditions such as drought. So with this, we are aiming to increase yield stability and reduce risk under the drought condition. And this partnership is targeting both conventional breeding, but also the use of biotechnology. So if you look at the bigger picture, we want to promote the adoption of drought-tolerant hybrids, maybe dealer biotech traits that would both protect against insect and also against droughts, and improve the seed regulatory landscape and also contribute to some of our sustainability pledges. So you could see some of the partners we are working with. I wouldn't go through all of these, but we do work with CIMMYT, with AATF. AATF is a Kenya-based and non-governmental organization that is kind of brokering some of these deals between organizations like Bayer and the other partners who are involved in all of this, to make sure that the technology is given to the farmers royalty-free. And this is in very advanced stages, particularly here in Kenya, where some of the maize are already undergoing trials. Ethiopia is also on the radar. These are the East African countries that I can think of who are part of this project. Now there's another partnership which is also to do with breeding, which we are working with IITA, basically to boost their breeding capacity. For lack of time, I'll just talk briefly about the vision. So this partnership is covering all of the IITA crops. So we're looking at cassava, cowpea, soybean, maize, yam, banana. Quite a bit of investment going into this, and we are hoping to help them boost their breeding capacity, and hopefully with that would be able to produce more germplasm that are more climate smart, particularly in some of these crops, which are, for lack of a better word, I could call them orphan crops that are not very widely traded, like say cassava and yam, banana, those ones, which are food security crops. At least help them to improve the breeding capacity in all of this. Now, one other thing I would want to mention, and I think Dr. Kendi also point out to that in his triangle that he showed, which is his last slide. A lot of these technological innovations are there and could be deployed in Africa, but one of the limiting factors sometimes tends to be the policy environment in Africa. So you have technologies that cannot be deployed to solve some of these challenges in Africa because the policy or the regulatory environment is just not adequate, or it's not ready to adopt some of these technological changes that are happening. And so I think that is one of the key areas where the public sector could also help in creating enabling policy environments for some of these technological innovations that could help us fight climate change better, and also create incentives for the private sector to play a key role in making this happen. And with that, I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Godwin, for this elaborate presentation. And we are so grateful for the research and for the support to agriculture research, agriculture innovation that Bayer is doing in this region. Thank you, really. You visit the chat box and the Q&A interface. You might find some questions for you, and you may go ahead and write the answers. And you'll be our last panelist tonight. But before we finish, there are two discussants that I would like to invite now. The first discussant is Dr. Abdi-Jama. Dr. Abdi-Jama holds a doctoral degree in rangeland ecology from Texas and A&M University in Texas, USA. He has over 30 years experience in agriculture, food security, resilience programs in many parts of the world, but particularly in the Greater Horn of Africa region. Dr. Jama is currently the coordinator of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Food Security, Nutrition, Resilience Analysis Hub, or IFRA, and the hub integrates Food Security and Nutrition Working Group, the Resilience Analysis Unit, RAU, and the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, IPC. It's a new hub, and it provides a platform for sharing regional food and nutrition security information and analysis with regard to emergencies, and also coordinates efforts to prevent food crises in the IGAD region. Dr. Abdi-Jama, welcome.
Thank you, Jasper. And thank you, everybody. Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
These were very interesting presentations that we have heard, from past and present impacts of climate change on agriculture and food security. We have seen also the projected future scenarios. We have heard also about Sendai framework and how it is really the basis for climate smart agriculture issues. We have, and lastly, we have seen also the public and private sector. We have also heard Dr. Artan setting the scene and highlighting the situation that our region is currently in terms of food security. We are really in an unprecedented situation where, among all the other things that we used to deal with these economic shocks, conflict, and climate change to a large extent, and also we have now other things. We have the pandemic, COVID-19. We have desert locusts and floods in our region right now. And when you look at all of them, I mean, there used to be floods and droughts alternating, but you can see now that the frequency is so, is so narrow now. It's one or the other. It's either flood or the drought. So this is really, again, I'm sure that these unprecedented threats could, lead to really taking us back in terms of some of the work we were doing, whether it's SDGs, Sendai Framework, Malabo Declaration, CADEP, all of these things, resilience issues from all perspectives. I'm sure that some of these things, but here, and over the 30 years I've been involved in this, I have seen some of the degradation of the environment that, particularly for livestock, there was a change of seasonality and things like that. I have seen it with my own eyes. The huge differences between areas in the region that I visited 30 years ago and now. So this is really the other issue is also the population growth. I was reading that recently that we have 320 million youth, and in the next 30 years or so, that will double, let alone other things. And agriculture provides employment for, in some countries, up to 80% or 70%. And youth really they don't seem to be, to a large extent, interested in agriculture. So really, that is another challenge that we may have. But coming back to climate, we do annual food crisis report. And in all of the years we have been involved, climate was #1 in terms of cost of the driver, as a driver of food insecurity. But when you look at it, we have a series of climate centers. We have ICPAC, we have the national METs, we have the research stations. As we can see, we seem to know the solutions, but why are we not translating this into action and into impact? I think it was 2018, there was an international meeting on high-level meeting on food security in Africa. And the most important resolution that came out of it was agriculture and food systems must adapt to climate change if we were to feed our growing population. So I believe what comes out of it is obviously you have the whole value chain of agriculture and food security, and there are a series of challenges, but I think the focus here was climate change. And climate change is through climate smart agriculture. There were a lot of solutions and a lot of analysis presented, but the biggest, one of the biggest issues in my opinion on why these solutions, which we know off the top of our head, are not translating into action, is we are all working in silos. Agriculture group just maybe taking the 10-day rainfall of what the national Mets produce. Research are doing their own research, independent of the policy group. So I believe there is a need for all of us to, in order to solve this problem, to coordinate and join forces in to be able to use all that wealth of knowledge and information and research into action. And we have so many research, platforms in Africa, the academies, the SDGs, the Africa 2063 is there. But somehow, when you look at all these different pillars, it looks like each of the groups is doing taking a pillar and doing things on their own. We are not. We really need into and some of you have mentioned. I think it was Dr. Tesfaye who was saying that we need an integrated technical, policy, and institutional collaboration to be able to do these things. And I believe that is one. So climate smart agriculture really is the key to the future. The private sector is mentioned, and private sector is also very, very important. I have seen, these discussions of public-private sector. Right now in our region and in the rest of the continent, the private sector, the public sector is very strong and has all the private sector is down there. Really, it should be the reverse, in my opinion. The public sector needs to provide the enabling environment, the policies, and all of these things. But I think most of the things belong to in agriculture belong to the private sector. And when you take even farmers are private sector. So really, there needs to be, empowering closer relationship between public and private sector, and empowering our private. There definitely needs to be a balance between a farmer who wants to feed himself and maybe few of his family, and a big private sector. So, but each one of them has a role. In fact, it's the bulk of our feed comes from smallholder farmers now, and they need to have the support. Private sector, I think the issue of trade also, Africa, in all the years we have seen, is we are still, as Africans, we are still exporting raw materials since after 60-something, 70 years of independence. And so that's another area, not just the agriculture farming, but also the manufacturing and the industry part also need to be. But as was rightly said by all the presenters, it is not just, obviously climate change is key, and the industry, agriculture as such, need to adapt. But there are also a lot of other factors that are compounding the impact of climate smart agriculture. I saw recently there is a regional climate center for adaptation was inaugurated in Abidjan at the African Development Bank. We have ICPAC, and we have also the national Mets. We have all the research stations in the region. We have the ministries that are in charge of agriculture, livestock, and fisheries, and all the other sectors. We really need to join forces to be able to make to deal with the issue of climate on agriculture. So with that, I think I would back to you, Jasper. That's my reading of the presentations, even though I didn't go one by one. Thank you, Jasper.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Jama, for that useful contribution. I think the message has sunk. So we have one additional discussant, and then we will attempt to answer the questions coming from the participants. We encourage the panelists who are answering questions to do it publicly, not to answer privately, so that other participants can contribute. So with that, may I now invite Dr. John Kabayo. Dr. John Kabayo is the coordinator of the IGAD Drought Disaster Resilience and Sustainability Initiative, IDRISI. IDRISI was launched after the heads of state and governments in the countries in the Horn of Africa convened the summit in response to the drought that hit the region in 2010 and 2011. And the heads of state made a collective decision to end drought emergencies. And following that, a comprehensive, holistic, and coordinated undertaking called IDRISI that is being executed as a regional plan to build the resilience of drought-prone communities by addressing their challenges and vulnerabilities, including food insecurity, poverty, and environmental degradation, was born. IDRISI is now aimed at mobilizing national action backed by regional thinking. Bwana Kabayo will give reactions to presentations with reference to building resilience for the vulnerable communities in our region. Dr. Kabayo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jasper, and good afternoon, everyone. I welcome this webinar as an opportunity for us to review and discuss the challenges of climate change and variability, whose impact on our region is threatening our very existence. I am grateful for the information and points of view expressed and elaborated by the colleagues who spoke before me this afternoon, and I wish to acknowledge the significance of their thoughts and helpful suggestions in our efforts to generate a proper understanding of the challenges of climate change and variability, especially with respect to agriculture and food security in our region, and of course also for purposes of developing a way forward. The panelists, or can I call them conversationists? I unfortunately didn't hear Julius Kabubi. I came slightly late. I didn't hear Dr. Atan as well. But Dr. Komtunga and Dr. Kindi and Godwin Lengo, I listened to them very well. They articulated the dire and worsening food security deficit and hunger and malnutrition situation in our region, which continues to bring to the fore the level of our vulnerability and remind us about the urgency and importance of what needs to be done. We cannot continue to be the captive victims of the erratic extremes and vagaries of our ecological circumstances. Climate change and variability in all their ramifications continue to cause declining productivity in virtually all sectors, especially affecting agriculture and food security. Many problems are mentioned: vectors of disease, pests, human health issues, including heat stress, flooding, damage to infrastructure, and all sorts of manners of economic impacts and losses. But let's not agonize all the time. Let's organize also. And I'm sure, we know that no sustainable development and no viable livelihood outcomes can be achieved without finding ways to effectively and urgently address these concerns. Integration of climate smart policies and resilience enhancing interventions in our development strategies is therefore a must. There are already ongoing efforts in that direction, I'm pleased to say. For example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Sendai DRR framework, the Paris Climate Agreement, the EU Agenda 2063, various regional strategies and national development plans including the famous IDRISI, the IGAD Drought Disaster Resilience Sustainability Initiative, which is close to my heart. They are all, in my view, the correct prescriptions to address our concerns and cure our condition. But their dosage and their rate of applications are low and dispersed, and their effects are being overwhelmed or eroded by the magnitude of the impact of climate change. We need to revamp our efforts. If we are running, walking, we would need to run. If we are running, we need to fly. And so, like, do so like our lives depend on it, because they do. They say that when the going gets tough, it's the tough that continue to go or continue going. We need to be more innovative. And in this regard, I wish to gratefully acknowledge the efforts that some of which have been described, for example, at ICPAC, where renewed efforts and serious engagement is vested into developing more effective early warning strategies, tools, and applications to support better environment management, prepare more effective disaster risk reduction capabilities, and create more fronts of attacking this enemy. There have also been other approaches described. Resistant varieties are being developed. Climate smart germplasms were described. Better methods of production were described. Carbon sequestration, the emphasis on partnerships and involvement of private sector were described. But for me, the key word in all this is resilience. Making resilience the real target of our interventions. The gentleman, I think Godwin made a proposal which was very interesting, ironic, I should say, making agriculture part of the solution to climate change. It's like having an opportunity for a victim to revenge against its the crime perpetration. It's a very interesting idea, but clearly these are all steps in the right direction. Resilience is to do with developing the capacity to withstand the effects of the next disaster, and therefore it is a universal way of managing our issues and moving on. So I'm very pleased about this trend, this dialogue, and this continued interaction with these issues. We need clearly to scratch our heads more and get things done. But a lot of the things that are on the ground need to be revamped, need to be increased, more of them. We know the medicine, but we just need to increase the dose. And I think the key in all this is resilience. Building resilience should be the target of all interventions that we can think of, because that way we'll be ready for the next disaster. Over to you, Jasper. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, General Caballo. And the message has sunk. I've liked the idea of the definition of resilience, that developing the capacity to withstand the next disaster. I think that has sunk home. And I think that's what we need to do, given that all the other major presenters highlighted a bad future for us. So we need to have this capacity to withstand the next disaster. So we are almost done. We will go through a few questions, and we'll be giving time to the panelists to go through to give answers to the different questions. Some are targeted to different panelists, others are to all panelists. So I will be asking each one to contribute. And as I come to that, I would like to also recognize some of the distinguished participants here. Priscilla Miri from ECHO, Sebastian Gray from WMO, Ibrahim El Taib from FAO Sudan, Mubarak Mabuya, Gender Officer IGAD, Christophe Orude from University of Nairobi, Geoffrey Sabiti from ICPAC, Dereje Wakija from ICPALD, Deborah Duvesong, FAO, Dawit Gebre, CCAFS Regional, Charity Mumbua, IFRA, Nicoletta Buono, Judith Akolo, a distinguished journalist, Kenneth Mwangi, a distinguished remote sensing expert, Maren Radin from CCAFS, Eunice Kowech. The list is so long. Thank you very much, friends, for coming to listen to us today. So the first question, unfortunately, goes to Kabubi. We have tried many times. He said he couldn't come back. So we'll go to another one from the gender expert, Mubarak Mabuya. He's asking all the panelists that how are the issues raised impacted differently on women and men, or female against male-headed households? That we would also like to see what opportunities exist for women or men at the exit route towards resilience building. This question goes to all panelists. However, if one of you has got a quick answer, then prepare to answer it. The next question is from Bahanu Tadese to all panelists, that given most of the disease and pests mentioned are either sporadic in nature, like desert locust, or introduced from other parts of the world, can we really relate only climate change? He goes on to say some of the disease or pests could have been introduced, couldn't have been introduced if countries in Africa had stronger quarantine systems in place. He wants to hear the views of the panelists on this. I think Dr. Komtunga and possibly Dr. Kindi, you should give a shot on this question. Then a question from Dr. Dereje from ICPAL to Dr. Kindi, that apart from resilience building, is there an option of transformation on the horizon for climate change, highly affected areas and livelihoods? NKS as an example. So if we can go through those three questions, beginning with the gender one, how are the females or the males headed households affected differently by the issues that you raised above? Any panelist willing to give a shot on this?
Okay, let me try that, Jasper.
Thank you, Dr. Kindi. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think, shall I go through three of them or just the first one?
You can actually go through
the three of them you raised. Okay.
Yeah.
I think, I think the issue of the impacts of climate change on gender issues. Yes, I think this is true. That climate change has disproportionate effects on women particularly. You know that in Africa, particularly in Eastern Africa, women are, taking over the responsibility of family management in many ways. But in terms of decisions and resources, they have limited role on those ones. So if you don't have the resources to respond to the change, and if you don't have the adaptive capacity to respond to the different climatic vagaries that happen in a season, that means that you are most affected compared to or relative to the one who has got some decision-making power, who have got control over resources, and who have got also some exposure to knowledge and experience. So those who do not have those amenities or capacities are mostly affected, and those are mostly women. So that's why we said that women are mostly disproportionately affected by climate change because they don't have the decision power, they don't have really control over resources, and they are not highly exposed to the knowledge and trainings that their counterparts are mostly exposed to because of cultural and other issues that we are inheriting from the past generation. So that is why I think in many cases we did some research in the pastoral areas in the Afar region of Ethiopia, and we found that women are highly influenced by any climate shock because they are the ones responsible to feed the children. The men, they just came out early in the morning and they go and they come back. But women are mostly psychologically even affected because they should put food on the table. And if they don't do that, they are, even they don't have a good sleep because of, the psychological impact of that. So it has got so many dimensions. And because of that, we say that women are disproportionately, not only women, but also other disadvantaged groups the same way. Coming to the pest and disease issue, I think that is true that we cannot relate every issue that is happening to climate change. But I think I agree with Brhanu that yes, everything is not attributed to climate change. We need to be careful on that. But I think in terms of disease and pests, I think what we mean here is that climate change is favoring the intensity, frequency, and geographical distribution of the pests and diseases that are new as well as even existing ones. So even some of because most of the diseases are influenced by climatic factors, be it humidity, be it temperature, be it moisture. So on those ones, when we are talking about the disease and pests, we are talking about these three things: severity, incidence, and also distribution. So that aspect is highly influenced by the climate. Even if the pest exists, it could be controlled had it not been that the climate is not conducive for that pest or disease to go beyond the geographical limit of its adaptation. Now that adaptation is changing. It is favoring most of the disease and pests, but somehow also disfavoring others. But here we talk about most of the disease and pests that are highly favored by these ones. For example, if you take the wheat rust in East Africa, it is migrating from other parts of the world easily here, and it could be even carried from here to another one. And that is highly influenced by the climatic situation in that particular season. Thirdly, I think the question by Derecha is transformative versus resilience issues. Yes, I think when you talk about climate change, there are different types of adaptation. In fact, resilience is an outcome. But I think the adaptation issues, there are also transformative adaptation is important, where you don't have, the luxury of continuing in the past. For example, if a given region is highly dependent on crops for its livelihood, and because of the climate change, that area is not anymore conducive for growing those crops, it may be changed into another land use type. For example, it could be agroforestry, it could be livestock or any other. So we call that kind of things as transformative. And if you are referring transformation that way, so if you transform that, then again, in other words, you are building resilience. So we have to look at it. Resilience is an outcome of what we do. It's not just part of, staying where you are and going. I think the definition of resilience is changing, that it is, as already mentioned, it is more of an outcome. So even if you do the transformation of agriculture, at the end of the day, what you are going to bring about in terms of climate terminology is that you're building the resilience of that system, or the building the relevance of the agriculture situation in that particular area. So I think we have to look at resilience as an outcome here. So thank you very much, Jasper.
Okay, thank you very much, Bwana Kindi. I have other 3 questions. Unfortunately, I didn't get time to write them down, but let me read them out. The first one goes to Dr. Komutunga, and it's from Judith Akolo. She says, you painted a rather grim picture in relation to diseases and pests affecting agricultural productivity in the region. Do you see technology helping out on this? That's to Dr. Komutunga. Is technology going to help in addressing the grim picture that you painted in relation?
Oh, thank you, Jasper. Can I answer that right away? Hello.
Then I think this is to okay, go ahead, Dr. Go ahead. Dr. Komutunga.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. as
I sent a reply already. The youth can only be encouraged to work on this if technology is good. But there are challenges with pests and diseases in terms of technology. We can only do like surveillance using mobile apps. But in terms of control, like for example, for the desert locust, the boom sprayers, the technology to control, like boom sprayers, were lacking in the eastern Uganda. There were no sprayers that could reach the tops of mountains. So yes, technology is a bit lagging behind, but in terms of IT, we can advance in that direction in terms of early warning and monitoring. Thank you.
So, moderator, if I may just add to that, is that okay?
It's okay, Godwin.
So again, just to add to what Dr. Ari has said, and I think technology has a very big role to play here in various aspects. So if we are talking digital for surveillance, disease surveillance. It is now very possible to scan your field even using drones to identify the exact field areas where that could be under disease pressure. So you can target your crop protection application. But aside that, technology also allows us to now engineer very disease-resistant crops using various methods. It could be biotechnology, it could be genome editing. Again, but that would require some political willingness and also a good policy environment to do that. So there are various aspects where we could deploy technology. A good example is fall armyworm right now, where there are biotech crops that are very good resistance to fall armyworm right now. That can be part of an integrated solution to help us combat fall armyworm. Unfortunately, when it comes to Africa, the only part of Africa where such technologies have been deployed is South Africa. Other sub-Saharan African countries have not had the opportunity to deploy some of these technologies because sometimes the policy environment can be a bit slow. So there are technologies out there that can be deployed. It's not all doom and gloom. Yes, climate change would exacerbate the situation, but we anticipate that there would be technologies out there if there is enough enabling policy environment, at least to help us fight to a good extent some of these issues that would come in the future.
Okay, thank you, Godwin. And I think you have answered fully the addition made by Judith Akolo. But here is a question directed to you. How do you see the business interest of private companies and purchasing power of small-scale farmers in Africa? And this question is from Bahano Tadese. It's to you, Godwin. How do you see the business interest of private companies and the purchasing power of smallholder farmers in Africa?
So that's a very tricky one to answer. So it is very, very important that wherever you do business, you do so in a sustainable way, in such that people are able to afford it. I mean, if you are selling a product and no one can afford that product, then you are not going to. Wherever you're doing business and whatever technology you are
We are losing you, Godwin, or is it my internet?
We're okay.
Godwin? I think we have lost Godwin. Is there another panelist who can complete
Sorry, can you hear?
this question? Yes, yes,
Yeah,
Godwin.
so I lost connection briefly. So just to conclude on that. So whenever we deploy such technologies, we keep the customer in mind, making sure that the customer is able to afford such technology. I know sometimes multinational companies are looked upon as greedy and overpricing their technologies and also just trying to squash all competition. But I mean, Africa is a very big continent. We cannot do it all alone. We need to do it in partnership with other smaller companies, but also making sure that we are pricing at a level that is affordable by most smallholder farmers that we are working with. I don't know if this answers their question. I'm happy to take any follow-up.
Okay. Dr. Bahanu Tadese might get back to you if it's not completely understood. So the last question we will attempt is from John Masham. It is to all panelists. And he says, as a weather and climate scientist, I would like to ask, to what extent do the speakers think improved weather prediction on hours to even a season can increase resilience? And to what extent must it be new agriculture technologies? So this is to all panelists. He says, to what extent do the speakers think improved weather prediction can increase resilience, and to what extent must it be new agriculture technologies? So
if I could just take the first part.
Go ahead, Godwin.
So just briefly, and this is not an area of specialty for me, but I'll still attempt that. So there's climate prediction is going to be very key. We are already building that into some of the innovative technologies that are being rolled out. So we do have what we call Climate View, for instance. And this technology allows enhanced prediction. It gives the farmer a lot of opportunity to know how to prepare, when to use input, how much input to use, and all of that. Where they are experiencing stress, specific areas, and how to target their inputs. So climate prediction is going to be very, very, very key. It's already very key for us. It's part of the big data drive that is informing our digital agriculture or feeding into our digital agriculture platform right now. So for me, from a private sector point of view, it's a big deal.
Okay. Any other addition from the panelists?
Yes, Jasper. Yes, prediction is really very key in terms of early warning, but there needs to be more partnering in research. The weather people come up with the forecast, and the agricultural people or other sectors come up with their things in parallel. Maybe there is need for people to work together. For example, if I'm developing a new maize variety that is targeting foreign worm, and I know the thresholds at which it develops, then I link up with the Met people and they give me like the time when that kind of condition is available. Together we can come up with a very good early warning system for that kind of pest. That is just an example. But yes, true. The weather prediction is really key in terms of getting to know when things are going to happen, when people are going to open land, when people are going to plant. But there needs to be much more collaboration than what is there currently. Thank you.
Okay. Any other panelists to make any additions? And if not, may I inform you that our next webinar will be on climate, conflict, and human security. This will be another interesting one, and it will take place around October the 20th. So we will again get back to you, dear participants, and let you know about this. Otherwise, thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, the IT people who made this possible. Thank you, the participants. Thanks, everyone really who participated. Be in touch with you. May I ask Dr. Jama if he has just a word or two to conclude just before we close today's webinar.
Thank you, Jasper. It looks like your battery is getting low. I don't know. I can't hear you very well. You are breaking up. I think you deserve a rest.
Sorry about that.
Yes, just yeah. I think thank you, first of all, yourself for facilitating this webinar. I don't want to make a speech, but what it is that I think we have reflected on this issue of climate and agriculture, the impact of climate change on agriculture. We have obviously the GACOF platform, Agriculture and Food Security, with Jasper and others lead. Every time we have a forecast, we do, we come together and see the implications of these forecasts on agriculture issues. So there is an active platform at the region that we can also join forces and interact on. We also, Jasper, myself, and obviously Oliver and some of my colleagues from FAO and WMO may be here, but we have also a project called Agriculture Climate Resilience Enhancement Initiative. And frankly, it's one of the, it's a climate smart agriculture. It's going on in Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. We have a network, we have the UN FAO involved, and they have a farmer field school. They engage the extension. We have WMO and ICPAC giving information on this. So actually, it's one of the projects I have seen where the partners, countries, even communities are involved, where we sit down with the communities to plan for the season. So we hope to, if you are in Uganda or in Kenya or in Ethiopia, please make sure you link up with this, even if you are not actively involved currently, there is that platform. And regionally, we have the GACOF also, where we bring everybody. Obviously, all the sectors, not just agriculture, is there. And I said also there's a new regional office on adaptation that was set up. So this decade, upcoming decade, is the decade, I think, of climate smart agriculture. There is also a regional alliance for climate smart agriculture. It's hosted by UN FAO and UNECA Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. They are also, we are working with them and really wanted to even institutionalize and say maybe the REX to take, advising the REX to take more lead on this alliance. We have, in terms of resources and stuff, also there's the Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, Parliamentarian Eastern Africa Parliamentarian Alliance Against Hunger and Nutrition. That's also an alliance that was formed about 2 years ago. So from research to policy to institutional, we have all the tools, and we hope we will all reflect on what we have discussed here and not stop it here, but continue the dialogue. Thank you all very much for coming, and God bless, stay safe. Back to you, Jasper.
Great, thank you, Dr. Jama. And with your very informative words and your very good words of wisdom, I would like us to end here. Let me wish everyone to enjoy the rest of the evening, and please feel free to continue engaging with us in all the future webinars and other forums as Dr. Jama has mentioned. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.